Welcome, everybody. Another Wine and Comics pairing show. We are back after a week-long break. I'm going to be flying solo today. It's just me, no Dallas, but we have a very special guest. We will introduce him and the comic we're going to be talking about today right after our little snazzy opening. Here we go, folks. All right. Welcome, everybody. Sound off in the comments. If you are watching, let us know who's here. I know a lot of you, we get a lot of Twitter audience, which can't really comment and can't really do the back and forth feedback. But if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, please drop a comment. We love the interaction. Today, we have Chris O'Hara, or is it O'Hara? How do you like to pronounce that?
I like the way you did it at first, but that's not right. It's O'Hara.
It's
O'Hara. You put
a
little twist on it, and I liked it, but O'Hara.
I know. In my head, I've been telling myself O'Hara. You know how you always, like, as you're typing the name and putting the thumbnails and prepping for the show, and it's like Chris O'Hara, Chris O'Hara. So I'm going to try to be good about that. But
I'll take whatever.
Chris O'Hara is with us today from Bentbot Comics and the writer of Artificial, issue number 1, which came out a couple months ago on Kickstarter, and issue number 2 is in prep on Kickstarter right now. I will drop that link in the comments for everybody so people can have a place that they can go and find that. And it will be launching probably sometime in April. That is a tentative date. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about, Chris, you state that issue number 1 of Artificial will be free for backers of Artificial number 2. Is that something that they do have to wait for the launch to actually happen, though, in order to read Artificial number 1?
I mean, no, not necessarily. If you want to back Artificial 2 when the Kickstarter goes live, then our plan is to, with any digital copy, allow the digital copy of issue 1 to be included. If you want to read it now, you can go buy it.
You can buy it. Okay.
You can spend money on it, and that will all go towards making issue 2 awesome and issue 3 and 4 and 5. But if you want to wait, you can always wait.
Awesome. And that is on Global Comics, I know, and Bentbox Comics' own store is there as well. And so first off, so Bentbox Comics is relatively new to me. I know I've seen you guys around. I've seen the titles when I started digging into what Bentbox does, but this was my first comic of Bentbox that I'd actually read was Artificial number 1. So give me some of the background. First, you as a writer, as a creator, how long have you been a writer? What made you want to be a writer? What made you fall into comics, or is comics what you do, at least at this point in time? And lastly, I know this is a long string. I do this.
You're good.
A long string of questions, all kind of bundled together. And lastly, Bentbox. That's you. And who else is Bentbox officially?
Sweet. Okay. I'll try and make this as short as I can, but there's a lot to unpack.
Go for it.
So yeah, my name's Chris. I have for a long time been what I would call a creative. That's just what I do. I love writing, storytelling, anything of that sort. When it comes to comics, though, my dad. So some of this might be reiteration. You might, if you see me do the circuit. My dad used to ink for Marvel back in the 80s. So I used to have I had a sprawling mural on my bedroom wall of Spider-Man and all his villains, hand drawn by my dad.
Nice.
It was just, we had all of those boxes that you would just see of they were bent and all beat up and just full of comics in like a walk-in closet we had specifically for comics. It was always part of my childhood growing up, and it was part of his childhood growing up. So it's just kind of been passed down. So as far as how I got into comics now, it's a bit of a roundabout way, because he actually, as many do, unfortunately, he bailed when I was 7. So he went out for a pack of smokes, didn't come back. It happens. Oh, no. And I
know it happens, and it's like so sad that is true. That is the way to say it. But
sometimes you just gotta laugh it off. I'm okay. So,
do you have any relations with your dad now?
No, actually, that's funny. Not many people have asked me that since I've mentioned it. So I'm not a petty person, but
I like how you have to couch it with that.
At the same time, I felt the need to send him a copy of Artificial because he ironically got fired from, actually, no, sorry, he quit Marvel when he gave him a pitch. And back then, that was another really cool thing, is back then they used to have they were like this big, that way you can have the scale perfectly to size and everything could be sized correctly before digital. So he had one of those in the house, and I remember going through it, and it was his pitch. They said, it needs a little work. I personally thought it was amazing, but then again, I was 4, so I was, none the wiser. But that made
you don't still he didn't leave that behind, so you haven't been able to go back to it, right?
Unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd go real petty and finalized version of that. So he quit Marvel because of that, because his pride got hurt and yada, yada, yada. So he ended up just dropping out of comics and working at like a Napa Auto Parts. And that's just what he ended up doing. So I felt the need to send him Artificial. I mean, partly because I'm very proud of it. And
no, absolutely. Yeah.
Partly to kind of, it was half, I don't really have much of a connection with him anymore. I just don't. So it's been probably since I've like talked to him.
Okay.
But I found his address and I sent him a copy.
Absolutely. And a small part of you, like on the one hand, you're like, look, I'm doing comics now, but there's also that part of you that's like, maybe he'll give a shit, and also like kind of like in that bonding way, like maybe this is something we can talk about, even if it's kind of awkward and distant and all that fun stuff that's of course going to come along with it. But it's like, but maybe there's something there, but I'm assuming you heard nothing back from it.
No, unfortunately not. I mean, my sister's more in contact with him, so, and I asked, I was like, did he get it? And she's like, yeah, he got it. He thought it was really cool. I was like, all right, cool.
Okay.
Great. Because there is that. I agree. There's that tidbit of like, am I being petty, or am I also like at 34
being hopeful in a weird way?
At 34, trying to make my dad proud. I don't know what I'm doing here, but anyway.
Yeah.
So that was the last correspondence I had with him, which wasn't even a correspondence, but I dropped out
an attempted correspondence.
It was an attempt. So I dropped out of everything like pop culture. We used to watch movies together, like Terminator. He got me into like the first time we ever went to see a movie in the theaters was Batman Returns, and like so like when I was super young. So he kind of was my gateway into this pop culture world, and then he left, and I kind of dropped it. Kind of I'm sure subliminally, just kind of like I don't really want anything to do with this anymore. And then my buddy John, which will roll into the later part of your question, made his own comic about 1.5 years, 2 years ago called The Last Wand. I would highly recommend you check it out. It is under the Bent Box umbrella.
Right.
But he made that on his own, showed me it, and I thought it was incredible. And I've always been a storyteller, and I just love entertaining. And it seemed, and I've said this before, a little tongue in cheek, it seemed like one of the more accessible ways of like realizing a story, because I've done indie game development before. Very difficult. It's fun, but it's difficult. I've tried to get like movie pitches done, TV shows. So like screenwriting stuff, I've also really enjoyed doing, but it's very difficult. I would definitely just say like comics felt like a nice entry point, and I had a history with it. So I kind of rode his coattails, as I tell him, into comics. And so I decided to brainstorm, and I had a, Word doc, like I'm sure 99% of people do, full of just, rantings of a madman who knows what this even means here and this means here. But,
made perfect sense the day you wrote it. Right. And then you're like, I'm sure when I revisit this 1 year from now, I will completely remember what I was thinking at 1 a.m. on this rando night.
Exactly. And I scrolled for like 15 minutes and I found one that made sense. And I was like, let's try that. So that turned into Artificial. And that was kind of my entry point into comics, or back into comics. Technically, it is definitely my first comic, and not my only. I have many, many other stories that are in the works and are being told. And then as far as Bent Box Comics goes, that was kind of a brainchild of myself and my partner, John, who I mentioned earlier. He was going under a different moniker called Unity Comics. He was trying his own thing. Once I started getting into the game, we kind of just liked the brandability of Bent Box Comics. So it did. I'm marketing by day, like I do marketing stuff.
Okay.
So it
Gotcha.
definitely was like let's just. I was like, I love Unity. It's great. It's great. It's the best. Let's do this.
Like as a professional marketer, would never touch it, but I love it.
It's good.
Now
it's
let's
good
go
stuff.
do this other thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So and that was one of those. I was almost nervous to like talk about it because I was like, I don't want you to feel like that. I'm not trying to say.
Right.
I did
right,
like
right,
it,
right.
but I definitely thought it would be an interesting thing to try and merge two very small emerging IP farms. That's what we're kind of like going for. We're just going to start making our own stuff into one
Right.
brand. And that's what it turned into. So now it's myself,
Amazing.
my partner John. We recently brought on a new creator. He goes by Star Million on Twitter.
Yes.
A lot of people will
Yes.
recognize him that way. His name's also John.
Yes. Just backed his thing yesterday because I was
Sweet.
digging through the Bentbox stuff and I saw that one was live and I looked at it and I was like, I think I fucking love this. So
looks pretty
I
sweet.
went for that and then we followed each other on Twitter today. So yeah. Here we are.
Yeah, there you go. And so we're trying to make it to where you're going to hear Bentbox Comics a lot. But we have a bunch of different stuff going on. So like his is going on. So right now we have 3 creators under the Bentbox moniker with a handful of others considering with their own IPs. We're trying to just go with like more of a creator driven publisher type deal. So
Right.
big plans kind of thing, but it really started very small, just
Okay.
making stories
And
we want to make.
and still just ramping up, kind of getting out
That's the
of
hopes.
the
Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, you do seem to have between Last Wish 1 and 2, Artificial now 1, now 2, the one. How do you pronounce the title of
Orium
the third
by
one?
Star Million.
Orium, yes. And then Orium, which is the one that I just backed yesterday. And guys, go check it out. I love black and white comics personally. I've mentioned this on previous episodes because this was only maybe a month ago that some Facebook group I was on and everyone was like, my top 10 comics of all time. And I was like, I'm going to make my top 10 comics of like personal favorites. So not like the industry changers, like we can all but just like personal to you. What are the ones that you go to and you're just like, these are my favorite of all time. And I got to number 8. I still haven't entirely decided what place 9 and 10 are going to be. And all 8 were black and white, which kind of took me aback. I was like, what the?
Yeah.
I knew some of them would be, but I didn't realize it was going to be that heavy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm plainly a black and white fiend, and I never quite realized how much of a black and white fiend I was. But then when I saw Orium and the black and white art there and the whole concept, the whole setup, I was just like, this. So
awesome.
I love black and white, but guys, also go check the art out on that one. Orium, it is OREIUM.
Yeah.
EIUM? Yes.
Yep.
That's why I didn't know how to pronounce it. I'm like, nope, not a word. Don't know what that is.
Not a word.
Not a word. And actually, we have a couple. John, rock on. Thanks for joining us. John from Part Time Comics. And we also have Paul Pate or Pate. I actually don't know how to pronounce your last name, Paul. Sitting here, drawing, enjoying the show. Welcome, Paul. We are so happy to have you. So let's get into Artificial for this one. So you were combing through your Word document. You found this one idea that is, and for folks here, I have some visual aids because I was so kindly sent some visual aids. So we have, this is Artificial number 1. You saw this on the thumbnail for the video and on social media as I was going, this is just a fucking killer cover. I mean, it's so good. And I do have to ask, where did you find Gabriel Finesca? Because holy cow, man. Blah, 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 folks, like, look, just look at the, you know what? I'm going to show you also the there's that beautiful sunflower double page. I mean, look at that. I mean, come
good one.
on. It's just, yeah. So this, and then the other cover, we'll talk about this edition as well, because I'm curious about this edition on top of that. But yeah, where did you find Gabriel?
So Gabriel Fonseca is from Brazil. I was, Fonseca. I mean, it's, I
got the E in the wrong place. I was Fonseca, and it's Fonseca. There you go. Sorry about that.
Makes it easy.
Sorry, Gabriel.
I butcher his name all the time. I've gotten better at it though. But he's from Brazil. He's a younger artist. I found him combing through. So that was one thing. Like John, my partner, was like, all right, once you come up with a story, that was another amazing thing that I give him tons of credit for, is he helped make Artificial smooth, because he ran through so many issues creating his own and trying to figure it out and what process you have to do. And then he kind of just like, hey, these are the problems. Don't fall in here. Don't fall in there. And it just made it super easy to make Artificial based on his help. So one of his things is like, all right, once you find a story you're interested in, find an art style that you would think would pair. We can use that term.
Ding, ding, ding.
Hey, marketing. So I was like, all right, good idea. So I went through basically every single, like we were talking off stream, the amount of things that are out there: Twitter, Instagram, there's Behance, there's ArtStation, there's tons of different ways. And I'm familiar with the majority of them because I used to do graphic design back in the day. So I've had profiles on these things. So I kind of knew where to scour and do some hunting. So I went to Behance, and Behance, another thing I really wanted to do is I wanted to find someone that I saw potential in. I have a good eye for art. I have a good eye for what looks good. That's what I'll say. I'm not gonna.
I mean, yes, you do.
I'm not gonna say like I'm really smart or anything, but I think I know what looks good. So I tried to basically find literally the lowest follower count. So like nobody's. I was like, who's a nobody? But is hustling. I want to see some hustle. I want to see some whips. I want to see some cool, interesting concepts. I want to see stuff like that. And yeah, I found him on Behance, reached out to him. I think he had like some Spider-Man stuff on there that was really interesting looking.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Very unique. Not I mean, no offense to people out there, not comic booky, not like your standard DC Marvel comic book. It looked like something when you pick it up, it's going to stand out as not, the big two or whatever. It's going to stand out as indie. So that's when I reached out to him, and he reached back, and it just became this partnership that's been amazing. I will say I owe the majority of everything that's been going on with Artificial to him, mainly because he's a wealth of knowledge. I found a diamond in the rough. He's a wealth of knowledge. He knows everything about comic books. There's so many times where I present him with a script, and he'll look through the pages and he'll go, and I've given him full creative freedom. That's another thing that I trust my artists. That's just something I've always done, because as much as I know it looks good, I know you know it looks good because you're an artist. So there's many times where he's like, I added a panel. I was like, I think this frame needed to be a little different. And
the beats are like, it goes better. It flows like, yeah.
And I'm like, it's perfect. It's perfect. There's a handful of moments in Artificial 1 that I could point to that were just him, where, hey, call it lazy writing if you want. I trusted him. And there's a couple panels on the script where it says, have fun. I was like, whatever you come up with, we'll talk about it, and then we'll see if we like it. And 99% of the time I like it.
I can see that. I'm going to give also. So yeah, John also just commented here. He's like, to the art. I mean, come on. Like, Jesus. Yeah. And Star Million, here you are.
It's late. He needs to go to bed.
Yes. Artificial is such a beautiful book, from art to the story. It's fantastic. Can't wait for number 2. I'm going to bring this other one where he's shooting this sort of artificial creature in the face. And Jesus, people. And there are so many moments art-wise. I can see what you mean by the like have fun and him adding beats and things like that, because there's a flow to his art style, and he is a specific style. Like, he's got something. I agree with you that it's like, it's not standard comic booky. If anything, it looks very not even like very modern European artwork, where it's like there's a lot of energy and fun. Like, there's a lot going on. But even then, like, this comic opens, even I'll give you guys, another, here's like just page number 1. Like, it opens in a very somber kind of mode. And Gabriel also, like, he does an amazing job of just putting this very everyday, and this goes on for pages, where it's just the energy very low key, very like muted, this is, so for those who want to know what Artificial is about, and I've only read issue number 1, and there's pretty much a lot that we don't know what it's about yet, in terms of issue number 1. Right. So I can't, this is a hard thing to put the premise together because the premise is a big fucking question mark still after number one, but you will be hooked after this first issue. Because okay, so it's Vincent Van Gogh, right? So it's Vincent Van Gogh in his twilight years. This is 1 or 2 years before 1 year before his suicide in real life, and he is where historically, he was living. His brother was financially supporting him. He was kind of alone. He had someone kind of looking after him, but he fucking didn't like him and was just depressed and morose and down on life in the way that a lot of, especially during this period in history, creative geniuses tend to be. And you're just kind of going through this depressed version of Vincent Van Gogh until some really weird shit just starts happening. And when it starts happening, it's not a slow burn build. It is just like one weird thing happens for like one page, and by page 2, all hell has broken loose. It is like bam, 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 and next thing you know, you're in like a different world, universe, or his world and universe has been shown to be something he didn't realize. It's not known what exactly is going on or why. But suddenly there are, the comic's called Artificial. I don't think it's going to be any, and it's all about this image is Vincent Van Gogh trying to get out of a little like artificial, weird, robotic being. So it's no spoilers to say that all these artificial beings start popping up, and it's like he's in this weird cyberpunky dystopian, or dystopian to him. It's a question. It doesn't really seem dystopian to the artificial beings world. And it's, at least in issue number 1, I mean, it's all craziness. And there's some other pages. I don't want to, we might show some more pages. I'm going to save that for later. And I don't just want to show the comic. But there are some other gorgeous art. Like there's this one splash page where he finally sees like this artificial world that he's in. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I've seen a lot of comic art. I've been reading comics for decades. And this art is something where I'm like, this is something. But to your credit as well, Chris, and whether you want to give yourself credit or whether you want to give all the people who helped you do your first comic credit as well, this story is not only super intriguing, beautifully for a first issue. I think you spend just enough slow burn time, and then the fact that it ramps up that quickly is something I've rarely ever seen. And so I give you kudos for that, because that took me by surprise. I expected this all to be like a slow peppering of things throughout all of issue number 1. And the fact that it just goes from 0 to 60 in about 2 pages flat was something I've pretty much never seen in a comic, to my knowledge. I can't come up with anything off the top of my head. So that was beautifully done. All the concepts in here are beautifully done. The concept itself, which I can't tell what it is, I'm like, this is a story. Like this is a really cool concept. I can see why you stopped at it in your Word document. Whatever this is and whatever is going on, it's fantastic. So I think
that was nice
for you for writing. This was your first issue, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that Gabriel was, but this was your first. So had you ever tried writing a comic script before this one?
No. So that's to your observation of how it is a slow burn, and then it punches you in the face for a couple pages and then leaves you out of breath for the rest. That was kind of, I wouldn't call myself a cinephile, but I love movies. I've seen, as many movies as I can, not all the classics, but the majority. I have my favorite directors and how they showcase their work, and their style is just amazing. Like my favorite right now is Guy Ritchie. And to the point where I'm currently writing this comic based on a true story, Guy Ritchie style, because I haven't really seen that done comics yet, like or at least not to the extent I want to take it, with like title cards for characters where it's just bang and then they say a little quip, and I wish there was soundtrack playing in the background, but you can't do that. So a lot of the writing in this book, if you looked at the script, which I'm sure it would make your eyes bleed because it's probably not very well written, but bless Gabriel's heart.
Is it the kind of overwritten script that first time writers? No. Okay.
No.
Under.
It is. Anything. Well, because once again, a lot of it was I know the setting, the characters, the general aesthetic, the
Hmm.
general vibe slash momentum of a page or paneling set. So like I have all those in mind and where point A starts and point B ends and how I need to get there. So I have all that in my head, but I'm trusting my artist. And that's, whether Gabriel really likes working with me so far, at least I hope.
Right.
But I trust my artist to fill in blanks and then we
Hmm.
can talk about it and dissect it and maybe tear things apart here and there. So no, the majority of my descriptions are, and they're all in like a film terminology, like camera angle, over shoulder right, pulled
Right.
back 3/4,
Right.
man scene here, AI
Right.
zombie scene there, rushing
Right.
towards, like that's it. And that's it though. And then I kind of let him just have fun. I say, and then I've told him multiple times, like, if you think this panel could be viewed in a different camera angle, just because that's how I visualize things, I said go for it, and he'll do it, and it normally turns out great. So, and there's also real quick the thing that we've coined is the rule of Gabriel, which is kind of fun. And the main reason for that is we ended up bringing on a secondary. He did all the art for Artificial One, so he did the
Hmm.
inking, coloring, and line art and lettering. So,
Yes. Okay,
and
cool.
it,
I'm going to talk about the lettering in just a minute. Yeah.
yeah, and it was mainly because I was like, dude, you're just capable. I was like, and this is his first comic, and I told him, I have full faith. I'm seeing what you can do, and it was almost like me. I was trying to just be his hype man. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
just freaking do it. I was like, and we were looking for a letterer, and he said I could probably find some people I know, and I was like, have you ever lettered before? He said, no, never lettered. I was like, would you like to try? And he goes, I don't know, I've never tried it. I was like, I'm going to tell you right now. No offense to letterers out there. I'm not saying it's easy or not or hard or whatever. I could see his potential. And I was like, you can do it. I was like, I just know you
Hmm.
can. And the
Hmm.
panels, the spacing that is needed per panel
Yes.
for the lettering. I
Yes.
was like, I think you have such an intimate knowledge of this comic book that it'll only be better if you letter it. And he
Yes.
freaking
And
killed it.
yes. And before you keep going on the rule of Gabriel, because we haven't heard the rule of Gabriel yet, but I think that's a great moment for me to mention something about the lettering. So I was going to ask you, so there was no credited letterer on
No,
the comic. It just says art
just
by,
artist.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I was like, but here's the thing, the lettering in this comic. So here's a great example here, guys. I'm going to try and bring it in as much as in focus as I can. Do, do,
It'll
do,
get
do.
there.
But you can see that both the font, da-dun, da-dun, and then there are other things like while the craziness is happening here, you've got all these sort of symbols that are sort of happening along with the lettering, along with the SFX. And one thing that really, because even this right here, like plainly this sound effect, it's
Hmm.
part of the art. Like
Hmm.
it's woven into the arts in a way that I wonder if a professional letterer would be like, I can't do that to the artist. It's like I've got my place and what I'm doing with my lettering, and he's
Yes.
got his, or he or she's got his. So mine has to enhance that, but it can't. I can't just bleed it into. It's not my place to bleed my
Right.
letterings that intricately into the artwork, which is kind of what like manga does and why people love manga, and that like
Yeah.
the lettering is known to be, especially the sound effects. The sound effects are always part of the art and are seen as that. And I've noticed in this comic, I'm an old man. I have like my eyesight is not what it used to be, and a lot of comic fonts are one of those things. Like in the opening scene, there's you have our main guy writing a letter to his brother, and it's all in like this cursive font and relatively tiny and
It's kind of
whatnot. And
tiny.
yeah,
I'll
it's kind
admit
of tiny.
that.
And and I had to pull out the magnifier app on my phone and just be like and like go through the page like that. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
used to it. I'm just like, yeah, if I'm gonna read a physical books these days, there's always sections where that's popping out. I'm popping my
Yeah.
magnifier out, and I'm
Well, that
like,
makes me feel a little better.
good. So I'm used to it, but at the same time, this was one of the comments where a lot of the times that annoys me that I have to do it, and I'm like, God, what's wrong with modern letterers?
Yeah.
But and especially, when I think a lot of professional letterers, the rule of thumb is don't get too fancy on the fonts because they can get hard to read.
Yeah.
So don't get too artful with them, because then people are like, what am I? It's taking me too long to look at it and understand what I'm seeing versus just being able to blow through it. But this was a rare occasion where I just appreciated all the fonts, and especially when he's doing the dialogue. I don't even know if I'd call that a font. It's like this weird, like I said, it's like he does the fonts in like these big looping, like just the plain dialogue sometimes, or like these big looping letters that he'll do. And I'm just like, this is so weirdly woven into the art itself that I'm appreciating it as an aesthetic, that the fact that it's not the easiest thing to read just isn't even bothering me. And that's a rare experience. So I give him full credit for doing all of that. This was such a pleasant surprise with the lettering, even though he definitely broke some rules that normally would be my tisk tisk, look at what they did.
That's the rules of Gabriel that you're mentioning there.
Okay.
That way we can tie back into it. But I will say, like, I'm a font guy. I have a folder with thousands of fonts. I love fonts because I used to work in graphic design. So that was a big part of this comic as we're going forward, was just like, I mean, not to sound overly like snooty or anything, but like every little piece of this comic, being my first one, every little piece of it was gone over with like a fine-tooth comb. It was like, what do we want the vibe to be on this page? What do we want the vibe to be on this specific panel? And you know what I mean? So like the font we chose was just more of a fun font that was for like the general dialogue.
Right.
It was just one I had that I loved, and I was like, this is just what I would just like to use. I was like, I appreciate the Times Roman numeral and whatnot, or Comic Sans, but let's just do let's do something fun. I think it was called like Breezy Picnic or something like that I own the commercial rights for it. I'm like, I like it. I was like, it's just it's a little poppy, and then as for the page that you mentioned with the letter that Vinny wrote, that actually, quick background there. I don't know if you know this, but Vincent, that's a letter to his brother Theo. Is a little inside for you. All of his letters are published to his brother and to multiple other people. So just to give you an idea of how the story is going to progress and how I hope you see this throughout the series. I read all of his published letters before writing this comic, before writing these 2 pages, because I knew I wanted to write a letter to his brother. It was going to be a vital part because it's kind of a suicide note, technically. What I did was basically just took inspiration from all of his letters. That way, if you read what you read in Artificial and then you went and read one of his published letters, it would just sound like how Vinny talks in letters. So like there's cadences he uses, there's people he mentions that I put in there a couple times. One thing at the very end, he says, sincerely with a handshake. And I remember I had my wife reading through it, and she goes, why does he say sincerely with a handshake? That sounds weird. She's like, that doesn't roll off the tongue. You should probably change that. I was like, I don't know. I was like, Vincent,
what he signed off as.
Like, don't ask me. I was like, I'm just the conduit to Vinny here. So that is what that whole page is basically a as true to form letter to Theo as possible. So, and I'm really proud of that, how that page went, even though it's very tiny and hard to read. Anyway, I feel you there. That's the problem with working digital. You know what I mean? Like being able to zoom in and be like, yeah, it looks good. And then you print it and you're like,
exactly.
That's a little small.
Well, that's why I've gotten kind of, I don't know if, I mean, I think I have just gotten older and my eyesight is not what it used to be, but also I've gotten used to reading a lot of digital these days. Like half my comic reading, if not more, is digital. And so you're used to pinch zooming whenever you need to, quickly going in, quickly going back out and looking at the page and whatever. And all of a sudden you're like, you're poking at the page and you're like, oh shit, where's my phone? I need my phone to literally zoom in like artificially. To get in there, because I'm like, I haven't read a normal sized comic page. Like it's just not something that I think my eyes are even that trained to do anymore.
I feel you. But to the rule of Gabriel, as we left off, the reason that got brought up is we ended up having to bring on a new colorist for issue 2 and moving forward. So he's going to be, his name's Sergio Martinez from Mexico, extremely talented guy. He's worked at Marvel. He's also done some like indie game stuff. I loved his stuff. Also a very similar story of like finding someone with a lower follower count that I saw a lot of potential That way I didn't bring on like a big name or anything. I just found some guy that I knew I could puff up, and he could do it. That's my whole game plan, because that's me. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
So I brought him on, and I was like, all right, let's try and copy the first issue as best as we can, color style, obviously, because we don't really want to have this be this drastic, just,
Shift.
like a whiplash. I will say there's a small whiplash, but we try to make it as good as we could, and it is better. It just is a better job. No offense, Gabriel, because he's a professional colorist.
Right.
That said, there were many times where we're going through Sergio's stuff, and he goes, and I'm like, why does this? I was like, this doesn't look like what we did in issue 1. I was like, can we change this? And he goes, well, technically, what Gabriel did isn't correct.
Right.
He said that a couple times. Well, he's like, there's no backlight here in this scene, so I don't know why he encased the character with like a nice halo effect.
Right. So and things also, are what do they call that? Unmotivated light, right? Yes. Or things like yeah.
And Gabriel said, oh, I just thought it looked cool.
Yeah.
And I said, I like that thinking. I was like, I appreciate you, Sergio, of saying, you know what, this isn't correct, but at the same time, is it cool? I was like, because I think that those are the questions we need to ask. And so the rule of Gabriel is it cool? If it's cool, do that. Now if it goes a little outside the realm of like, okay, this is too dark or it's too bright or it doesn't really make sense color wise, then we'll rein it in. But that is the rule of Gabriel that we've established. Is as long as it looks cool, we're going that route.
Yes. And be in a certain sense consistent. And I don't mean from issue to issue, but like, or scene to scene, but like within a certain scene. Because, movies get away with things all the time. Like take horror movies. When someone enters a pitch black room, at first it's pitch black, and then this unmotivated light will slightly brighten the place so you can see what the fuck is happening. That's the point, right? But the idea is the audience is still aware that it's a pitch, like the way the actor or actress is acting, it's still a pitch black room to them. We've just now brightened things to see things in certain ways. And so I think you can get away with a lot of that as long as within the scene itself, there's a logic to like the character is always lit well. And it's like, okay, but he's always lit well. So sure, we're not going to question it too late.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what is for this edition of Artificial, where you did decide to do this, it's not quite black and white or just gray tones, but it's some color peppered in. There's the lettering color, but then there's also like right here, a couple panels that kind of like sneak some color in and whatnot. So what is this edition and why?
So that is the propaganda edition. Every issue of the series will have a standard edition and a propaganda edition, mainly because the feedback for that edition in issue 1 was so great. A lot of people said they preferred it over the standard. So once again, we just went with what was cool. So, we're doing a Kickstarter. A lot of times when you do a Kickstarter, you end up getting that. What are you offering? Are you offering 17,000 covers? Are you offering 2 different versions? Are you offering this, that, or the other? And it's my first Kickstarter. I didn't want to offer just not junk, but just stuff. I didn't want to just offer stuff. So, but John, my partner, said maybe do a black and white version. It's lack of a better term, easy to kind of just turn the saturation off and present a black and white version. Maybe people will like that, like yourself, if you're more interested in black and white.
Yeah.
So we did that, and that's exactly why. Sorry, I saw that comment come up. It is a Sin City vibe. I am a huge fan of Sin City.
Yes. DMD nerd. Ooh, Sin City coloring, great at heightening a moment. Yes, it is.
I just love black and white with a splash of color, and there's something about it that just tickles my brain in the right way. And it was one of those things
and your brain gets tickled in that way of like, what is this color I'm seeing? Why am I seeing? Like, you really dial into what's happening. And even if there isn't a very explicit reason in terms, like, some of the dialogue boxes still have their color in them in this edition as well, which I really appreciated. I really liked. Is there a reason for it? And it's like, well, no, but again, it looks cool. It looks really great. And your brain does stop a moment just to like take it in and really, just to get, because this is a wine and comic show, just get a brief moment on comparisons between that type of thing in wine, like the best wine is the kind you have to think about while you're sipping it. Where there's so much going on with it that it's nice to have a simple glass of wine where you're like, I'm just drinking this to enjoy myself. I'm not here to dwell on anything, to think hard on anything. Time and a place for those. And then there's the time and place where it's like, you know, I was like, I need to sit with this glass. I need to figure out what I think about it. I mean, there's a lot going on. I like it, but I really need to pick apart why I like it. It's not obvious why I like it. I just know I do. But there, again, it's complex enough. And I think that a setup like this is, you know, whenever you have that black and white, or in this case, it's a lot of gray tone. Like none of it's like empty black and white. It's all very gray tone. You know what? I said I was going to show you that one splash page.
Yeah.
So here's the black and white with the color up top. This sort of like, here's Vincent suddenly running onto the screen, and here's this world he's in with, of course, the red skies and whatnot. And it's just a beautiful splash. But here's that black and white with that splash of color. And you just, in the color version, it's a mind-blowing moment. It's a, ooh, you know, you're just like, damn, look at that and whatnot. And they more colored it like kind of a blue type of a thing down here within the red up here. But even though this is really pretty, the black and white version is the one that you almost like stop and sit with a little bit longer. And you're just like, huh, what's going on in this picture? Like, now I want to pick it apart. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been asked that at multiple Comic-Cons because I've been going to a ton, and we kind of, that's how we're getting our word out, more like man on the street style. And I've had a lot of people go like, oh, you have two versions, cool. And they look at them, they'll look at the one, and they'll be like, oh, I like it, the standard, and they'll be like, oh, awesome. And then they'll look at the propaganda edition and go, oh, and that's their reaction. And I'm like, I love that reaction.
Yeah.
And then they go, you know, which one do you recommend? And I was like, I can't help but recommend the propaganda edition, which was a total afterthought. So that is one of those funny things of like, let's throw in a secondary version. And then it was black and white. And I'm like, well, what if it was colored a bit? I was like, I like Sin City. And then Gabriel, who's also kind of a cinephile and loves comics, bit right on. He's like, yeah. He goes, yeah, okay, I like it. And then we started picking apart, like, what do we want colored on this page? Let's make it that. Let's make it this.
Incredible.
And it just came together.
God, I mean, I think I agree with most people. Like that black and white, it stands out more. For me as a buyer, I would be like, well, which is the standard? Like you'd almost need to know that.
Exactly.
Like, you know, what is the first and foremost? And if it was the colored one, I'm be like, okay, well, if I only had money for one, I'm getting that one.
Right. It
sucks to be me, but I'm only going to get that one at that point. But I would want both because of that. Right. Exactly. So because there is something extra beautiful about that black and white version, even though it's all unnecessary beauty, you know, it's not like you can just enjoy the story from the main one. But yeah, I would have to buy the main one first just because I'm that type. I'm too OCD in terms of like, it has to be the main vision, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
But I'm glad you like it though.
Oh, absolutely. And Paul jumped back in, big Guy Ritchie fan here. Just a quick call back to the Guy Ritchie. And actually on that, so I'm going to ask you this about comics and movies, but let's start with comics on that. Like most influential comics for you before, just in general, but also when you wanted to embark on this one, like what did you pull from? And maybe they weren't comics. And if not, that's fair.
Not everyone loves this answer because I'm making comics, but I will say, so when I was young, once again, call back to that, I kind of dropped it all. I vaguely remember having like comics by my bed and reading a lot of Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man, I love Batman. Mm-hmm. Favorite villain in the world is Carnage, which is like something a 4-year-old probably shouldn't be reading, but it's fine. So like I was always into those worlds and I loved them so much. Not huge into DC. I was always into Marvel more, but I did have Batman, but that's because my dad worked at Marvel. But he still had pretty much everything. He had a taste of everything. I dropped it. I just got rid of it. So I didn't really, that imposter syndrome does sit in a bit when it comes to like, I'm writing a comic book and people go like, oh, this reminds me of issue 197 of this and this panel. I'm like, cool. I was like, yeah, I agree. Yeah. That's totally where I got it from.
Yeah, you're like, that's really specific. Thanks.
You got it. So like, and I'm not going to front on it either, just because I just have been out of it. So I've been doing
Yeah.
mainly movies. That's how my pop culture is just cinema for the most part. But I always loved writing, and once again, it just felt the most. Once I started writing comics, it just felt supernatural, and I was like, I love. I have tons of scripts now over multiple different IPs that I'm working on, and it's just so much fun. So I haven't really pulled, and that's another thing. Okay, so I don't want to pull from anyone too much, if that makes sense.
It does.
I'm sure some people have that habit, or at least have the struggle of going like, they read something and go like, man, I wish I would have thought of that, or like maybe I can do that in my own way, or let's see if I can take this page from this panel and I'll just put it in mine a bit and change it a bit. It's like, I really like how it looks in that one. I've kind of stayed away from everything. I read a handful of indie comics here and there from people I want to support. I love them very much. I literally try not to take inspiration from anyone. That might sound arrogant. I try not to take inspiration. I try and just
try is the key operative word, right? Yeah.
Because I'm sure I've been infiltrated,
of course,
at some point by someone, primarily cinema, though, some kind of director or a movie that I really love. Like Sam Raimi, honestly, is a huge influence on this comic and this series. The standard cover.
Now that you mention it, the 0 to 60 moment where it's like it's all slow. You're almost like, what is this movie? The acting's terrible, nothing's happening, and then absolute insanity.
You're right.
No, it's true. Well, and to be fair, this was mostly his first movie, right? Evil Dead, the first Evil Dead, where it's just like. But I read only recently, like within the last month, someone wrote an article about the first Evil Dead, and they mentioned that they were pretty sure, if it wasn't on purpose, they were like, it's still genius how the first third of that movie is almost willingly bad. Like the acting, the characters are one note, their acting isn't even believable. But then when they become possessed by Deadites, like,
there's such a contrast that happens that it makes it good. Or something.
And then like the giggly girl, like, that almost like you're like, what? Like this actress can't like act her way out of a wet paper bag, but then she gets blank white eyes and does the exact same thing with the makeup, and you're just like, oh, that is creepy as fuck. And now your pulse is racing and you're into it. And so they were like, the badness was whether or not whether this was the intended effect. It's kind of what made that movie work, is that badness just slinks into sheer terror and excitement in no time, and it just makes the whole thing work, almost like you needed it to be that bad to begin with. Anyway,
no, that's interesting. I never thought about that, but I would love to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that was on purpose. But like the standard edition, if you hold up the cover, I don't know, that's an homage to the original Evil Dead poster. So like Sam Raimi, as much as I'm saying I'm trying not to be inspired by too many people or anybody.
The Deadite under the floorboards reaching, or I guess it wasn't. It was the girl though, right?
Yeah. It was the girl like reaching out of the ground, being pulled down.
The ground. There you go.
So it was basically an homage to that. Issue 2, the main cover that we have planned, is going to be an homage to an anime. That's another reason why this series I've called it kind of like a love letter to human creativity, because as much as we haven't really touched on it a ton, the purpose or the reason why this came up is AI art and how prevalent it's been and how popular it's been.
You made a comic called Artificial that just came out in February. I'm like, it has to. You're stating something about, like, there's some element, even if it's peppered into the back, like, there's a theme in there somewhere. It's not the main point. I'm like, you've got to be commenting somewhat on that. So
yeah. So I mean, it's kind of just a commentary on the current state, where we could go with it, how important the creative process to a human is, which is kind of what I wanted to show with that early on Vincent Van Gogh just being desperate and down. I really wanted to put you there. So that was another thing that I was planning with that first half. So yeah, that's kind of, the purpose of this book is to showcase what humans can do creatively. And so I plan on making. There's also, if you look at the back, there's that Easter egg page that goes over how much we put into this comic directly from classical paintings We have direct one-to-one shots almost of those, just to kind of basically say, hey, you know, we really are bringing art into this book. Like that is the sole purpose of this. Hopefully the story's good. The writer kind of knows what he's doing, but the art's going to be good. That's my plan.
And how long is the series planned to be?
So right now I have a roadmap for around 8 issues.
Okay.
I would love for it to go longer. That is one of the reasons
8 issues, kind of like arc 1, which we could walk away from happily if we wanted to, needed to, kind of a thing.
Well, no, 8 issues is in. So that's why I didn't pitch this to a publisher. I found out in the pitching process that they're like, all right, we need the roadmap. We need to know what each issue is going to be, or at least the basic, you know, bones of it. We need to know point A, point B, you know, beginning, middle, and end. And I kind of said, and as much if this scares you away from the series, I apologize. I said, I don't know 100%. I know my beginning, middle, and end. I was like, I know that. I have no idea. Like issue 3, I just finished writing over the weekend, actually. I can't give away too much. I don't want to give away too much. But basically,
don't.
But basically, what I will say is that the party ends up, or our reluctant heroes end up being able to have some kind of tool that might be able to help them fight back against the zombie horde. And the only way for them to really kind of figure out how to use that is a hunting trip that's going to occur. And that just kind of just freaking fell out of my head. And I was just like, I would like that idea. And that was not in the roadmap. So that pushed me back an issue.
So it's like, I want this idea in this issue. I want to explore that in this issue. And so here's a whole other issue that was not in the plan. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's kind of my rule of cool. Is just that's like, it would be interesting to see our characters in this specific setting, as long as it still ties to the story, and that's my plan.
Okay, gorgeous. You know, so I think most people want stories that are like a true blue, like the creator, whoever's writing this, whoever the main creators are, like they get to have a certain creative freedom to explore the story to the best of their ability, the way they think it's going to play out the best. And yes, changing that as it goes, if it's actually not being pressured from editorial or from the studio or from whatever, you know, not a lost situation where it's like, well, we plan to wrap it up after 4 seasons, and the studio's like, yeah, it's popular, we're going for 3 more, and they're like,
but we're making money.
Right. And it's like, but we don't, you know, or the Supernatural show, things like that, where it's sort of like, you're like 5 seasons and we're out. And they're like, yeah, I think we got, now we're at season, you know, like 12 seasons later.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, okay, now we can wrap it up. And they're like, everyone's exhausted and none of it really,
it's
barely
convoluted,
coheres.
Like,
exactly. Exactly. I listened to a 2-part podcast on the Lost series because I never knew the behind the scenes stories. I've never actually seen Lost, which is another
I've
thing.
only seen the first season and I loved it. And then I just, for some weird reason, stopped watching. And then I heard everything that happened. I was like, I'm not even going to watch it.
Right. Not even going to watch it. And so the word of mouth, where it's like, it's kind of like some of the journey is brilliant. Like those moments along the journey, which people are like, those moments, just like, that's why you got sucked in. That's why we all watched this fucking thing. But, you know, they end like, was it worth it in the end? And I think for me, like, I love things that come to a natural ending. Like, I always hate those things that are so like, it's like, this is just going to go on until they put me in the ground, you know? And it's like, all right, I don't know. But at the same time, if you're like, I really do, like, this is how, like, I want the story. Like, I don't have an end. I know I have an ending in mind, but I don't know how long it's going to take to get there. That is perfectly cool as well, because it's like, okay, but you're in charge of it too. So I'm not too stressed out about, you know, other people coming in and dictating, you know, where it has to go or when it has to end, or having a rush end. You're like, okay, now I'm going to extend this and I'm going to start peppering in. There's going to be 24 issues, but then it doesn't sell that well. And they cancel you on issue 16. And then you're, you know, within 2 issues, you're wrapping the whole thing up and it wasn't ready and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. So, So that's my goal. That's one of the reasons why we did Bentbox, is just to not be tied down to anything. Now, obviously, we're flying by the seat of our pants and also by the seat of our savings account. So, you know what I mean? Like, this is what we're doing now. As much as I would love to, I love the idea of seeing a Marvel, you know, moniker on top of Artificial. I'm just going to do it, I guess, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so plans for, as of right now, we got Artificial 2 coming out. Last Wish 2 just ended not too long ago. I believe, the Kickstarter for that one.
Yeah, the last one, just to correct you, sorry.
Oh, the last one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
There and then I've already forgotten the name. The one I've backed, it's black and white.
Orium.
Once again, Orium
It's
is
a
also
unique name.
is live right now. It is. You
Yep.
know what? I'm gonna even type it into or Oreium. Yes.
Yep. Oreium.
Orium
Yep.
on Kickstarter. Go find it. Everyone go Orium, take that word, put it in the Kickstarter search engine, go find that sucker. I also put the link tree to Bentbox in the chat, and you can go to that link and it has all their Kickstarters, the ones that haven't quite yet launched and the ones that are currently live. You can go find them all right there, and then a link to their website where you can buy physical or digital issues of the stuff they've already put out there. Yep. So what is next for Bentbox, or have we basically covered, like, what's happening like within the next couple of months?
There's so much. It depends on how long you want the live stream to go, but we have a lot of plans, world domination all included, so it's going to happen. I have a large graphic novel I'm working on, which is a twist on the superhero story, which is kind of like it's inspired by my mom and stuff. So like, I'm really looking forward to that. Also being done by Gabriel, just because I asked him to test for it almost. I was like, can you do some concept art? Looks fantastic. So I'm working on that. We are coming out with an anthology at the end of the year. That's our goal. The Bentbox anthology. So it's basically all the creators under our moniker currently are going to come together with a couple 3 to 5 page short stories, and that'll be available hopefully by the end of the year. Digital only. We'll have a Kickstarter for that.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, if you go to our link tree, you'll see.
I've been waiting for someone to be brave enough to do a digital only Kickstarter. I'm excited to see how that goes.
That's another thing that I don't know how, I don't know how smart it is, but
I want it to be smart. I really want it to be smart. That's why. But you know what? Someone's got to do it. Because you got to get people used to it. Yes. So
that's my thought. Is like, you know what? I don't know, and that was once again, I kind of run with my throwaway ideas. They don't normally fail me too often, but that was one of the ones where we finally came together, and it was honestly John Starmillion, the writer of Orium. He presented the idea of wanting to do an anthology. I loved it. I reached out to some of our guys. We already have the story concepts already made up. Gabriel Fonseca is going to do mine. It's about a Santa Claus that turns into a werewolf. And then we have a bunch of different fun stuff. And then all that said, at the end of the conversation, I was just talking to my partner, John. And yeah, it was just like, let's do a Kickstarter for it. Maybe November. 1 tier, digital, $5. What do you think? And he goes, okay. And I was like, yeah, let's see what happens. So that was just the thing. I was like, let's just see what happens. Because it almost takes a lot of the strain as well off of the creative side when you end up going like, okay, hey, poster and collectible pin and, beanie that doesn't fit right and the artwork's weird.
Right. Fulfillment is digital too at the end. I mean, God bless America. If we can only get people to accept that, right? It's like the thing, the worlds that open to us after that.
To be fair, I don't really accept it. And that's why I sent you a physical copy, is because I love.
And I told Chris, I was like, you can just send us a PDF. And he's like, yeah, I know, but these turned out really well. I really want you to hold a physical copy. Because I'm like, don't spend money on shipping. Like that, I know how much it costs to ship things. And I mean, it's not breaking anyone's bank, but to send it to like and me and my co-host were on separate coasts, so he's got to send 2 packages out. So I was just like, oh no, but he insisted. So I'm like, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to say no more than once if someone wants to ship me a physical comic. But
I love him so much. So I'm with you on that though. Like I would love to flip my brain to digital only, and maybe one day we'll get there. But there's just something about physical. So like I had to send it to you. I was like, I just think you'd appreciate it more. So.
Well, and I might have. It's because I still haven't read these digitally like at all, because I've only read them physical, and I love the piss out of them. So all I can say is that all I know for sure is that. Okay, cool. But I will say that in a world like I probably read 75 to 80% digital these days, and maybe 20 to 25% physical, if that. And it's both a disposable income plus space, like I live in a city apartment, like it's limited. Like there's no garage, there's no attic, There's no basement. It's just the apartment. So if it ain't fitting easily in here, I'm just kind of effed, or I'm paying for storage somewhere, which is more money down the drain. And then on top of that, also, I think it's just, digital is also something where you can get digital collections for reasonable prices. You're not paying for shipping. So it's just a lot of saved income and environment. Let's spare our poor trees and things like that. And then the cost of shipping, like all that, like we're trying to decrease our carbon footprints in this world right now. And so it is like there's so many considerations that I don't want physical to like disappear. I think it will forever. Like people love holding books and comics and hardcovers and magazines, and there will always be a place for that. But if we can unclench people from the pure love of physical, where it's just sort of like everything, it's not in my hands, I don't understand why I'd want it, and I'm like, okay, we can get better than that though. And so
I would hope. I've even played with the idea of like if artificial would do better off just doing digital only for the whole series, and then once it's done, then doing a hardcover collectibles edition.
There you go.
So to where you can't even get physical like floppies or anything. I've played with that idea, but that's something that's an internal monologue of me just like, I don't want it. Like I want physical because I want to hold my comic in my hand. You know what I mean? There's something about it. So
yes,
maybe one day, I don't know. We'll see.
I feel you. And BMD nerd, when it comes to crowdfunding, I try to buy digitals unless I like the series, then I buy physical. I'm with you there. I think for single issues, I will almost always do, unless I'm supporting the creator. Like sometimes they're struggling like in those first days to like really get the funding happening, and I'm like, okay, I'll give you more than $5. Like I feel like I can contribute more. Let me buy the physical cover and an alt cover, and now I'm, but it goes from like $5 to $25 or $30 like that.
It's pretty quick,
right? So it goes. So I'm like, okay, I'm supporting you, motherfucker. Like, come on, I appreciate this. So I'll do that. And then, of course, trades are the one thing I will try to make space for on my shelves. I think long term, but even then, not always. Like trades, even then, I'm sometimes like, you know what? I'm just gonna buy the digital, and I want the trade as a fully collected edition. I know there's gonna be bonus stuff and behind the scenes and all that fun stuff, even if I already own the digital single issues. But I think I would love to live in a crowdfunding world where there's a nice mix of like, this Kickstarter is for the physical product. But think about how much easier if you're only doing digital. Yes, it's a cheaper product. I would say as a recommendation, consider having some digital extras that people can add on for a little extra bucks, just to make sure. I mean, maybe you're pretty sure you don't need that, but like digital prints. I know that prints, right? It's like, it's digital. How is it a print? But it's like digital prints, digital. I know a lot of people do things where it's like almost like something you can cut out, but you got to print it yourself and then cut it out, and then you've got an item kind of type of thing. Things like that, where like there are certain all digital, but do it all digital. So like, there's nothing that you're delivering except digital files at the end of the day. But I really would love more of a mix on Kickstarter in the future, where it's like, we're doing digital for single issues. You can pay, then you're actually raising money to like pay the creators more than you're raising money.
That's what I'd rather do.
Print the stupid thing, right? And then the graphic novel, yes, you've paid for all the individual issues. You've gotten money to the creatives. Now the graphic novel, we're printing it and we're shipping it, and that's what this money is for. Like, it would just make so much more sense if we can get ourselves to that state. But we got work to do on that, I think.
Oh, maybe we'll put in some work. That might be something we'll do while
awesome.
the meeting.
There you go. All right. So I think we're at the wine pairing part, guys. So what would I pair with artificial here? And there's a couple of answers to this. The wine in my glass is the main answer, and that's what I'm going to bring up in a moment. But first, there are a couple of ways for those who are watching the Wine and Comics Pairing Show for the first time tonight, or for those who haven't watched in a while, or for those who have. I'm sorry, you're going to hear the spiel all over again. But there's a couple of different ways you can pair. One is, of course, you're matching the energy of the comic, like how it impacts you, the emotional connection you have to the comic. That, is it an electric, exciting comic? Is it a dark and brooding comic? Like, you're trying to match that aesthetic with what you're drinking so that they batch together. You can contrast them so that if the comic is very heavily one thing and you're like, okay, I love that, but I actually want to sip something that is quite the exact polar fucking opposite of that, so that this is balancing my whole state out, where I'm like, I think these two things go together because of that balance, rather than something that's tipping me even deeper into that exact one type of feeling or that one type of expression. And one thing that Dallas likes to do, and he's not here today, but I'm so sad he's not here, because this is something he does from time to time, and I've never done it, and I'm doing it today. And that is, he often will try and be like, what would I want to sip if I'm the character in the comic? What would I want to drink in that situation? So before I get to that, I do think that from a aesthetic of the comic, the energy of the comic, it starts with that very somber, like we said, this is Vincent van Gogh, end of his life. He is suicidal. He's not having a good time. That double page spread that I showed you of him with the sunflowers, I'm going to show it one more time here. This gorgeous, gorgeous double page spread. And then you can see down here, he's got a gun in his hand. Now I'm flipping people off. Sorry. He's got a gun in his hand. He took that gun with him for a reason. And who knows if that was the day he was going to pull the trigger, but he was in a not happy place at that point. But as we've also mentioned about this comic, in about 2 pages, it goes from 0 to 60, and you are off on an absolute electrifying adventure. So I think there's the ways you'd want to do it. If you're drinking a white wine, if you are a white wine person, or even if you're not, you would want an electric white kind of wine, like something super bright, acidic, just full of what they actually call in the wine world energy. So it's an energetic wine. And what they mean by that, there are 2 white wines I would heavily recommend with this. One is a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs, they are tart, they are acidic, they are like, there's a lot of citrus notes in there, kiwi, and it's just got this like effervescent kind of quality to it. Like, it's not like California Sauvignon Blanc, or really Sauvignon Blanc from anywhere else, from France, from Italy. Like, it is the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. It's so just, it comes out like lemongrass tea. It's just very tart and lively, and like, it makes you feel alive when you're drinking it. And the other one that makes you feel alive is a white wine called Picpoul. And I wanted to do Picpoul because it's a French wine, so we're going to harken back to Vincent van Gogh and the setting of the comic, the sort of setting of the comic in France, which is, Picpoul, Picpoul. It literally in French means lip stinger. And it is because it is that sharp and that just like bam, 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 bam. Like, when you're sipping it, you're just like, whoa, Jesus fucking Christ. But it is, when you're in the mood for that, it's like drinking a lemonade that has a lot of sharpness to it, or that lemon lime soda, or that lemongrass tea, something that just has that sparklingness to it, that you're just like, I kind of want this. And I do think that I think it counterbalances the somberness of the beginning and then matches the energy of the second half. If you're doing a red, I would go with a wine, and I'm going to go this red that I'm going to mention. The red in my glass here is another French wine, which I also am really happy that I chose a French wine to match this. But there's an Italian red called Nebbiolo. And there's a place in Italy called Alba. So it's Nebbiolo d'Alba, D''Alba, meaning it's from Alba. And Nebbiolo is often a very expensive, it's like the king of Italian reds. There is no more expensive wine in Italy, hardly, than when you get Nebbiolo is usually under a label called Barolo, because that's where it's grown the best, and it's the region, and they don't tell you it's Nebbiolo, they just call it Barolo. And Barolo is about as cheap as Barolos get, or like $40 to $50, and that's like the sort of like dirt cheap Barolos. And from there, you get up to the triple digits and beyond. It's just considered amazing. But Barolos, you have to age for like 5 to 10 years minimum before they're even drinkable. They're one of those kinds of wines. So they're not for your everyday drinking whatsoever. And the price kind of reflects that. But also, you got to be a wine nerd to really appreciate a Barolo, I think. You got to be like deep into that geek territory. A Nebbiolo d'Alba, they grow that region of Italy grows Nebbiolo to where it's younger, it's fresher, it's nicer, it's lighter. It's usually around the $20 to $30 per bottle range, and it's quaffable. I mean, it is like porch sipping, and it's delicious, but it's got that brightness and acidity to it in a red, but then it's got that complexities of the red as well. I think as a red, that would go incredibly well with artificial. But the one I actually went with, this is the wine. I was trying to think what wine, because it starts in such a dark place and then it goes to such a lively place. I was like, what if I was Vincent van Gogh at the beginning of this comic and I was sitting in this cafe somewhere, and this is Europe. They serve wine in cafes. If I was there,
Yep.
I was like, what would I drink that would make me want to keep living? What would I drink that would make me keep going and get out of this depression and get to kind of where I am in my more like, I want to live, I want to struggle, I want to survive in the second half of the comic bit kind of a thing. Like, what would just make me happy? And for that, I went with, this is a Cabernet Franc. And this is Larocque Cabernet Franc from Cité de Carcassonne, which is what they call a vin de paix, Pays in France. This is basically your local wine. This was imported to America, and it was $12.99 a bottle. In Europe, this would probably be €3 or €4 for the whole bottle. It is not an expensive wine at all. It is for the locals to consume. And it's actually not that hard, or it used to be hard to find these in America. They never imported it because it was always the local wine. And it's like, yeah, no one abroad gives a shit. But we actually do. And here's why. Not only is it affordable as fuck, but it is just, Europe has been making wine for so long that the €3 to €4 bottles of wine are incredible. They're really good. There is no bad wine really in Europe. And this is just a Cabernet Franc is a red wine. It's the parent grape of Cabernet Sauvignon, by the way. Okay, that's where the Cabernet part of Cabernet Sauvignon. It's Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. They parented them and created Cabernet Sauvignon out of them. And Cabernet Franc is a lot like Cabernet Sauvignon, except it's got this sort of green pepper vegetal note to it. The Cabernet Sauvignon does not. So it's got this sort of acidity, this acidic green pepper bite to it on top of the nice dark red fruits that you're going to get from it, that black pepper and tobacco on the back. And then as a vin de paix, as the local everyday wine, you get all this jammy, wonderful fruit right up front on your first sip, almost to the point where you think it's going to be too much. And then it backs way off and becomes austere, and you get that green pepper element, and it just balances the whole fucking thing out. You could drink glass after glass after glass of this. It would never weigh you down. It would never get cloying. It would never become too much. And you could probably afford more than one glass or even one bottle, honestly. And I was like, this is the wine that I would drink if I was Vincent. If I was just like, I just need to get through another day. Every time I would drink this, I'd be like, yeah, I could live till tomorrow and come back for this again. And I think it's got that blend of the heaviness and the brightness that you need to match the two sides of at least this issue number 1. We'll see where issue number 2 takes us. So for issue number 1 of Artificial, I say go find a Vin de Paix Cabernet Franc. You'll probably know. You might have to add, like, go to Total Wine, go to wine or Total Beverage or Bevmo. Ask the people there; they'll know if they have one, and they will probably have at least one. Ask for that, and I think that is just that was my perfect pairing. That's
wow. I'm speechless.
Blah blah blah. But yeah, that was the wine education part of the show. But to wrap us up here, we always ask our guests to bring on a third-party comic that is not their own, that they have been loving or have loved, or they just want to spotlight and shout out, and pair it with a beverage of their choice. Does not have to be wine, doesn't even have to be alcoholic. It just has to be a beverage. So Chris, what you got for us, my man?
Okay, so I went and got these earlier today because I've been reading them over the last couple of weeks. Call back to us wanting to do an anthology. I have a couple of anthologies here. I'll just bring up 2 real quick.
Okay.
Both indie that I really enjoyed. Here's one called Everything is Different Now, by Justin Richards. He's the collaborator.
I'm going to make you bigger. Hold that up there. There we go.
I'm big. There you go.
Nice.
Everything's Different Now. This is like the alt cover. I really liked it, but it has some really cool stories. This is my favorite in here, and this actually is the one that calls basically the name. It has a line in this specific mini comic that says everything is different now. But highly recommend this book. It's a really fun read. So I'm
I
on
do
a
love that
diet.
cover too.
Yeah, I love it. I'm on a diet, and I also don't really drink. I don't really drink alcohol. Just never gotten into it. So I'm going to
Yep.
be boring, unfortunately, and I'm going to give you. So for everything is different now. I'm going to pair it with a beautiful, light cosmic stardust Alani. That's as
Oh,
best
gorgeous.
as I could do for you. I'm sorry. But
I'm okay
zero
with it.
cal, it's got a nice fruitiness to it. I'm not even pretend to do what you just did because it was a thing of beauty watching you do what you did.
The nice fruitiness to it. That was mwah.
It nice fruitiness. You know, it's very light. It's vegan. It's everything you want.
There you go.
And then just because that was nice and short, another one I really like for a very different vibe is called actually, what is it called exactly?
Oh,
Zombies
Seeker.
We're Human Too. Yeah.
Oh no,
So
zombies. Sorry. I read that totally wrong when it was
no.
small. Go.
Yeah, Zombies We're Human Too. This one, I think there's like 3 more out by now. I think this one
Okay.
is one that came out a while ago. But this one also, and it's funny that you mentioned it, black and white's your favorite. This one, my favorite in here is a black and white short comic that I just love the art style. It's just super silly, and it kind of calls back to a Love, Death, and Robots episode. If you ask me, I get that vibe. So this one's really cool, and I highly recommend you try and find that one because I'm in an anthology mood. I'm trying to get in that mode whenever we make our anthology, and I'm going to pair that with a lovely cherry slush and Alani. Dude, this is all that's in my fridge. So like when you said find
nice
something
cherry
pair,
slush for the zombies and the blood and the gore. Nice cherry slush,
go.
right?
See,
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing.
You know what you're doing.
And it's the only thing in my fridge, so it worked out.
So you made it work.
I made it work. That's
how we do it, folks. That's how we do it. Yeah, it's funny. I used to, so throughout all my young adulthood, like I was never into alcohol either. Like I drank once in a very blue moon, like very socially at a bar, like a drink. I was to this day, I'm still pretty much a lightweight. The wine nerdiness has definitely finally started to, like, I can feel myself getting, like I'm feeling it less and less. Like I need to drink more to feel it. I'm like, oh shit, it's happening. But I only got into wine maybe about 8 years ago or so. And I just fell down the rabbit hole. I couldn't even entirely tell you why, but I did. Never looked back. But like you, just was never a drinker until I found that one thing that I was just like this. And unfortunately, wine is such a rabbit hole. Like you'll never learn everything, even if you study it for your life.
I'm not really, like you said, I'm not really into wine, and you know, blasphemy for even coming on the show. But
not really.
I love just going on shows that are different. You know, if I don't really know anything, I can learn from people and stuff like that. So like you doing that spiel, I was very enthralled, and it was fun to watch. So I just appreciate people who are good at what they do. You know what I mean? Similar to like just letting my artist do what he does. It's just cool to see people in their element. But yeah, I've never, so like the closest I've never even touched alcohol. My uncle passed me a Heineken once when I was like 8 and I spit it out and that was it.
Yeah, my grandparents gave me probably a Bud Light. I think when I was around the same age, like 8 or 10, and they're like, "Well, you want to?" And they drank it all the time, so they're like, "You want to try it?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then you're like, "Yeah, one sip," and you're like, "That is the nastiest thing." And to be fair, it was Bud Light. It probably was, but it was that was the nastiest thing I've ever put in my mouth. And like, also never looked back on. Nope. I've actually tried to get a little into beer. It's still a work in progress. It's not happening easily for me, but I'm trying to be open. Now that I've gotten into wine, I'm like trying to be more open-minded about whiskey and beer and but you know, limited budgets and limited.
That's an expensive hobby right there.
Yes. And I don't like, I want to have like, you know, I have in my apartment right now, there are over 350 bottles of wine. And so I like to have a storage problem, not a drinking problem, is the way I like to say it. And it's like, I don't want to get so deep into these things that I'm drinking all the bloody time and like can't stop. And I'm like, I'm okay. I got to pace myself. And like, I still like being mostly alcohol free, just appreciating it and partaking as it goes. But I will say, you know, doing this on the show, most of the guests we have on like are from the comics world. So they're not wine people, and that is the point. It was conceived
cool.
that way, where it's like,
yeah,
we are the wine people. That's on us. You just come on and talk about your comic. That's what that's for. So yeah,
sweet. I love it. It's really cool.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed. I hope everyone who is watching has enjoyed this. Bentbox Comics, Chris O'Hara.
Nailed it.
Now I've already forget. Did I get it right?
Nailed it.
It was like 50-50 chance. Chris O'Hara, Bentbox Comics, Artificial #2 coming very soon. Just in case those of you who were not here earlier, I will drop the Kickstarter link one more time into the chat for you there. I also dropped the Linktree chat just a little while ago. Go find them. They have lots of great things going on. Orium #1 is currently on Kickstarter. I just backed that yesterday. Artificial 2 is coming probably sometime in April, but we don't have a launch date quite yet, but keep an eye out for that. And an all-digital anthology coming later in the year, which I will also definitely keep my eye out for. But anyway, Chris, I'm sure this won't be the last time that you're on and the last time we talk with all that you guys have going on. But thanks so much for being here. Any last words or anything we didn't cover that you want to mention before we sign off?
If you have 2 minutes, I remember I posted that I was going to have an exclusive, like, little sneak peek at issue 2.
Son of a bitch. Yes.
And I was like, I kept posting. I was like, I don't want to not do it. It's nothing major. It's just a colored page and a black and white page from issue 2. And I figured I could show those off real fast and show you kind of we're in a different spot. So see what you think. You down?
Yep. Let's do it.
All right. I'm going to hold on. Let me make sure I even have it up. There it is. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Share.
I think if you share the screen, and then I might have to approve it once you've clicked it. Share. See what happened. There it is. Add to stage. There we go.
All right. So I'm going to zoom on in. Let me know if you can see this pretty good.
Yes.
So completely out of context, but here is a nice color working a page that we got by Sergio
new colorist,
Martinez.
Right? Yeah.
This is a new colorist. So one thing I want to showcase here is obviously, we left off in this AI dystopian future with everything's tech. We still have some tech going on, but I want to keep you on your toes. And so we're going to play around with creature creation and all kinds of stuff in this comic, and I'm super excited
science
about it.
All gone amok kind of a thing. Almost, huh? Yeah.
And then one thing I love about Gabriel is his just how he draws faces. It's just so funny.
His expressions. Love it. He does the best noses too. He gives everyone a crazy nose, and I kind of love it.
That's another thing why I love this is Marie Cassatt, and I was like, let's start, developing her character. And once again, no offense to everybody, but it's not your typical chick in a comic book. You know what I mean? Like she has something about her. It's where she's just unique and original, and I just love it. So here's this one. This is the colored one. That way you can get a taste of the color that you're going to be getting in issue 2. It's very professionally done and just looks so clean. And then here is probably my favorite page in issue 2. Once again, we are definitely going to take you through ranges of emotion and pushing the boundaries of what we want to do on a page with how panels are being executed. Yeah. Can't wait for this thing to be colored.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, we got a lot going on. It's going to be a real fun comic.
That's awesome.
There you go. That was your sneak peek at issue 2. It's coming along real well.
Sneak peek. Woohoo! All right, guys. Exclusive. You saw it here first. If you're watching later in the day, well, you still probably saw it here first if you're watching later after the live stream. But all right, folks, that is all for us today. So one last time, Chris O'Hara, Bentbox Comics. Go check them out. Find their Linktree. Find their anything on social media. Find all their Kickstarters. They have a lot. And see what you like. And I'm excited for it. You got a lot of great looking things going on. I've only read Artificial so far, but I'm really looking forward to checking out Orium. Really looking forward to checking out the rest. So all right, folks, have a wonderful. We'll be back tomorrow with Madeline Holly Rosing. With Boston Metaphysical Society. Once again, same bat time, same bat channel, 5 p.m. PT, 8 p.m. ET. We will see you then. And until then, take care. Drink some wine. Be motivated. be inspired, even if you're not normally a wine drinker, as long as alcohol, you're not like a teetotaler or not a living a sober lifestyle. If you are, keep living a sober lifestyle. It's good for you. But if not, I don't want to ruin that. But if not, yeah, he's like, just drink this. But if not, try some wine. Go out there. Trader Joe's has some great budget wine. Get started. That's where I got started. And look at me now. So go there, see what happens with you. And of course, read some amazing comics, including Artificial Number One. All right, folks, we'll check you next time. Ciao for now.